Hello and welcome to the 2020 Grant Workshop presented by the Community Foundation serving West Central Illinois and Northeast Missouri. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel our last face-to-face workshop, and so everyone who is scheduled for that has been invited to participate or watch this recorded version of the workshop. It will be divided into two sections and be available on our website. This is part one, and then you'll have to go to another link for part two. My name is Heath Richmond. I am the Chief Community Officer for the Community Foundation serving West Central Illinois and Northeast Missouri. I am responsible for the grant and program opportunities within the Community Foundation. Today we're going to be talking about the competitive grant cycle for 2020. We're going to start today with a brief overview of the Community Foundation, talk about grant guidelines, the funds available, the timeline for grants and evaluation process. I'm going to give you some helpful hints, and any questions and answers that you do have regarding the webinar or the 2020 competitive grants, please don't hesitate to email me at hrichmond@mycommunityfoundation.org or give us a call at 217-222-1237 to ask those questions and get the answers that you need. Who exactly is the Community Foundation? We're going to start there. The Community Foundation, we are a public 501c3 public charity that was established in 1997. We were established to supply local and permanent endowments in order to help support the community needs that we have in the 12 counties we serve, 4 in Missouri and 4 in Illinois and 8 in Missouri. Currently, we have over 195 funds. We've contributed over $8 million in grants back to our communities to over 400 grantees. What exactly does the Community Foundation do? Well, the Community Foundation is established in order to grow or to gather, grow, and grant monies back to the community. We gather those monies from charitable dollars that individuals, families, business, and nonprofits want to use to help create funds to make a philanthropic impact on our communities. We then take those funds and we invest them and grow them with local advisors to build a permanent charitable endowment that will serve the needs of our community now and in the future. And thirdly, we make grants from those endowed funds based on each fund's intentions and the donor's intentions of those funds. And we invest in the 12-county region through grants that are given out through a number of different avenues. And the vast majority of all of our grant funds go back to our 12 counties, but we do have some grants that some of our donor advisors recommend to other programs that are in other areas outside of our 12 counties. Why would somebody want to invest in a community foundation and not establish their own endowment or trust and do it themselves? Well, for one, we're here for you. We want to be here to make sure that what matters most to you as the donor or as the community happens in the best way, not just now, but in the future as well. Your community foundation works with you to meet your charitable goals and create a meaningful legacy of the gifts that you want to leave to support our communities. And those community funds are there exactly for your communities. Your gifts to the Community Foundation help support your favorite charities, causes, communities, and much more. And these funds will be here forever. Because your Community Foundation focuses on endowment, your gift becomes a permanent asset to ensure funds will always be available to support your charitable interests. Also, in many cases, the amount of paperwork and rules that you have to follow in order to establish your own trust or endowment, we take care of those needs for you. So we already have a board, we already have policies in place, we already have mechanisms to make those grants, and it makes it easier for someone who has a philanthropic desire to make those desires become reality, and they can do it through the Community Foundation in a much easier way, and also allows them to be part of our invested assets so they can get a better return on the money that they do have because it becomes part of a bigger pool of money that we can oversee at the Community Foundation. Now with the Community Foundation, we make grants, and those grants are determined how we make those are through our grant policy and guidelines. On our website, there's available for you to download the grant policy and guideline form that is there for you to reference anytime you have any questions about grants. Of course, you can always call us, but that document is available to you in case you need a question answered and we're not available to take the phone call. I will be referencing that grant document several times throughout this workshop, and if you have any questions, you can always use it to reference. So where exactly does the Community Foundation serve? Well, basically our territory is the counties that are within a 50-mile radius of our headquarters city of Quincy, Illinois. So we serve Adams, Brown, Hancock, and Pike counties here in Illinois, and Clark, Lewis, Knox, Marion, Monroe, Pike, Rawls, and Shelby counties in Missouri. Initially, the Lewis County, Iowa was also part of our community foundation. Because each of the counties in Iowa have their own community foundation and we don't want to compete with each other, they are no longer part of our direct service area, as they have a community foundation of their own that serves the needs of their people. Through the Community Foundation, we make grants from a number of different funds, and there's different ways that you can, or funds you can establish with the Community Foundation to serve what's best in the interests of you as a donor's charitable gift ideas. The best funds that we have, and the ones that we enjoy the most, are those unrestricted endowment funds that we have. These are funds that were established by donors that trust the Community Foundation enough to be responsive to the needs of the community and make grants that are best serve the people that we are serving both now and in the future. So just like an unrestricted gift to your organization, the donor says, we believe in you and we want to give you money that you can do with whatever you want. The unrestricted endowment funds also allow us to be responsive to those needs as well. The second type of fund we have is our field of interest funds. Field of interest funds are set up to serve a specific type of service area that the donor wishes to support. It could be geographic in nature, it could be program type in nature, or it could be serve multiple different functions. So field of interest funds might serve the 4 counties we have in Illinois, a specific county, or it might be for a specific community. It might be for programs that support arts and culture. It might be for educational support, health or human services needs. And in many cases, the donor has a specific thing that they're interested in serving and that they're passionate about. A field of interest fund allows them to leave a legacy behind that is going to continue to support those programs or places that are most important to them. These field of interest funds can be very broad in nature, or it could be very specific. In fact, we have one fund that is for instrumental music programs for children who are 10 years old or younger. And some are as broad as any program within this specific county within the Community Foundation can apply for a grant from this fund. The third type of funds we have is our largest pool of grant making every year, and that's our donor advised funds. The donor advised funds are established so that the donor still has the ability to make recommendations on their grants. And they've established these funds because they realize that what they're interested in contributing to or donating to today might change in the future. And so the donor advised fund is flexible enough that each year they can decide where they want to recommend those grants to go to. And while this year they might be supporting arts and education programs, next year it might be a human services need or a health need that they decide they want to support. And the donor advised funds allows them the flexibility to change the type of interest they have each year in giving their gifts. The fourth type of fund that we have is pretty self-explanatory. A scholarship fund is set up with a school in order to allow one of their students to go on and pursue continuing education at either a college or a tech school after they graduate from high school. And the last type of fund is a designated fund. Designated funds have been designated for a specific organization or agency so that they have funds in place to help support them and provide a financial gift every year forever. This could be a fund that the agency themselves decided to set up because they, at a time of plenty, when they had extra money, they put some of that money aside, so it'll be there in the future in case there's a time when there's less money available, and they'll always know that they have that income from the granted amount or the earnings off that endowment fund every year. Or it could be one that was set up by an individual who believes very strongly in an organization and wants to make sure that organization is cared for in years to come, maybe when they're no longer available, to give donations to them. So they've established a designated fund that provides annual giving to those specific organizations. In 2019, our 5 types of funds actually contributed $1.7 million in grants back to our communities in different various grant policies we have every year. For the most part, the Community Foundation publicly announces 3 different types of grants. We publicly announce our competitive grants each year. In August, when those were presented last year, just over $125,000 were given out to community agencies to support the programs that they are running in our communities. We also have a public announcement when one of our donor advised funds, the Samantha Otta Youth Opportunity Fund, makes their gifts every year in December. And in 2019, those gifts total a little over $30,000. And the third type of fund that we publicly announce are those agency and designated funds that each year in December, when we make those distributions to the agencies, we do have a press announcement saying how much money has been given back to the communities through those designated funds. And in 2019, that amounted to just over $288,000. So in total, slightly over $400,000 is publicly announced every year about who we give those grants to. But in reality, the Community Foundation does much more than that. And as I said before, in 2019, we publicly announced over $400,000 in grants, but we actually made $1.7 million in grants back to our communities. That's another benefit of the Community Foundation, is it allows our donors to have a certain degree of anonymity in their philanthropic giving, so that people maybe not, they don't want to know what their generosity is, and they don't do it for the recognition. They just do it because it's the right thing to do, and they want to be good stewards of their community and their own wealth, and make sure that they're passing on some of those benefits to other people. And they're not there for the recognition; they're just there to help other people. And the Community Foundation allows them to do that anonymously and still be able to make those contributions. We do also have a 6th type of fund that occasionally comes into play. For the last several years, we have not had it, and that would be the pass-through and fiscal sponsorship fund. But in 2020, we are actually serving as the fiscal sponsor for the Adams and Brown Schuyler CEO programs. These are entrepreneurial programs that are going into the schools and teaching young people about how to be business leaders and develop their own business strategies and learn more about the world of business and get some instruction in that, and also develop some mentorships that they can learn to be entrepreneurs in their own right. So who's eligible to apply for a competitive grant from the Community Foundation? Well, there are 3 main types of organizations that are eligible to apply for funding. The first, of course, is any 501c3 charitable organization as designated by the federal government. Now, there are many different types of 501c organizations. The C3 are eligible for competitive grant funds. Several of the others are not. They may be cemetery boards or fraternal organizations that have a 501 designation, but not the C3 designation. The second group that is eligible to apply for competitive grant funds are government entities that are doing things for public or charitable purposes. So like school districts who educate our youth, or a park district who provides us recreational space in our community, or it might be a city or village government that is improving sidewalks or lighting in the community to make it safer for the community and their citizens to just get around town and navigate around their own communities. Now, 4th group of organizations can also apply for funding. These are ones that don't have their own status as an eligible organization, but have actually worked with an eligible organization to be their fiscal sponsor. And in many cases, this will be an organization that has applied for 501c3 status, has not yet gained that specific recognition for themselves, but have already started doing the good works that they plan to do as a 501c3 organization. And they get another 501c to be their sponsor, and we would make the grant to that eligible organization, who would then manage the money and manage the grant for the organization that would not normally be eligible. If you look in the Community Foundation's grant policy and guidelines document, Section 1 discusses its eligibility requirements. The second form of eligibility to receive a competitive grant is that you have to be doing program in one of our 12 counties. So the program that you're asking for funding for has to benefit the citizens of the 12 counties that live within the geographic service area of the Community Foundation. This does not mean that your organization has to be headquartered or based there, only that the program that you're asking for money for is serving citizens who are part of our 12 counties. Example of that would be the Food Bank of Central and Northeast Missouri, are based and headquartered in Columbia, Missouri. If they do programs in several of our counties and have received competitive grants for food programs that they have done in Lewis, Shelby, and Marion counties in the past. The third type of eligibility that we ask is that you, the program or project that you're doing or your organization follows one of the interest areas that the Community Foundation supports. Requests must fall within the following 5 areas of interest. Those are arts and culture, community betterment, education, health, and human services. Many times the project or program that you are asking for might serve multiple interest areas. So if it's an art education program for students, you would have an option of putting that in either under art or education. If you have any questions as to what the interest area of your project is, please give me a phone call and we can discuss that to determine which interest area is the best way for you to designate your request. And in most cases, the programs that you're doing are going to be some kind of community betterment, and we might be placing them under that category to get you to identify your program as a community betterment program. So what kind of programs or projects can you ask for from the competitive grants? Well, in Section 2 of the Grant Policy and Guideline, these are listed out in more detail, but I do want to go over a couple of quick ones with you. Some things that type of project that will be considered for grants. You're not guaranteed of receiving a competitive grant, but to get consideration, those grant requests need to be for some kind of program that supports one of our 5 focus areas, a program that increases your organization's capacity, so it improves your organization so you can better serve your constituents and the part of the community that you serve within the 12 counties served by the Community Foundation. We also like to see programs that are seed grants to initiate new ideas or new programs to kind of get them kick-started and get them on their way to becoming a long-term successful program. We also like programs that address specific needs within the community that have been identified, and we also like programs that highlight collaboration with other organizations. We feel that when organizations work together on a common project, they tend to be able to utilize their resources in a more effective manner, and we can make some of those limited dollars go a lot further when more organizations are working together to see that the community needs is met. Now, those are just a few of the things that will be considered, but there are certain things that no matter how well you write your grant, if it is for any of these items, we will not consider a grant for these things because they're ineligible programs to ask for. And the first of those is that we do not grant competitive grants to anybody seeking to add to their endowment or their annual fund drives. We don't do competitive grants that will overcome a budget deficit or reduce your debt. We also do not do multi-year grants. Competitive grants and other grants from the Community Foundation have to be utilized and completed within 12 months of receiving your grant check, and so we don't do multi-year grants. If your organization happens to be part of a national organization, any type of national fundraising events, we will not help those with competitive grants, and we do not use competitive grants to provide sponsorship for events. Nothing can be used for any political campaign or organization, and if it's for a specific religious purpose, we do not allow you to get a competitive grant for that. But if your religious organization is doing something for the public good, like a food pantry or an after-school program, or you're providing a homeless shelter, those things are for the public good, and those type of projects will be considered. So where exactly and how much money are we going to have to give out this year in competitive grants? Well, last year we had $125,000 that we gave out in competitive grants, and this year, as of today, we currently have approximately $138,000 designated to go into the competitive grant programs. Some of these funds may be allocated to other projects and programs depending on what the needs of the community are, but as of today, we do have $138,000 designated for the 2020 competitive grant program. And when we talked earlier about the types of funds that we have, the 2 types of funds that contribute to the competitive grant program each year are proceeds from our unrestricted endowment funds and from our field of interest funds. We have a third type of fund, which is actually a field of interest funds, but we kind of look at them a little bit separately, and those are our county endowment funds. And this year, the county endowment funds, 6 of our counties now have their own endowment, which is Adams, Brown, Hancock, Pike, Lewis, and Marion. They also have a county fund council that will mean that any grants requests that are made for programs that happen in any one of those specific 6 counties, a group of local citizens from that county will actually review the applications and determine where funding needs to go. Because while we try to keep abreast of what's going on in all 12 of our counties, our grant committees do not all know the ins and outs of every community in our service area. And so by having people directly boots on the ground in those counties, we feel that they have a better feel for what's going on and what should be the highest priority of funding within their counties. So the field of interest funds, the unrestricted funds are kind of, we've already talked about them, but we have certain specific field of interest funds. You actually have the field of interest funds, and you can download a copy of this list from our website, which will tell you what those field of interest funds are and what the general purpose of those funds are for. And you can't specifically ask for money from a specific field of interest fund, but I would like you to review what those purposes are, and if you find a fund that has a purpose that's is met by the program that you're asking for funding for, please make sure that you use some of that language to demonstrate that how this project will fit the purpose of that fund, and so that we can help determine how the allocations of funds should go. So again, you can't specifically apply for a specific fund, but by demonstrating within your grant description, your application description, what you're doing, if that can clearly show that you meet the purpose of the fund, it will make it easier for us to designate those field of interest funds to the proper community needs. So we talked a little bit about those county endowment funds. Well, county endowment funds, as of 2020, Hancock, Adams, Brown, Pike, and Lewis and Marion counties all have their own county endowment funds. And this slide shows how much those funds have for distribution in 2020 towards meeting the needs of the applications that serve projects within their counties. Two of those funds, the Adams County Fund and the Marion County Fund, also have an additional field of interest fund that was established by one of our donors, the Home Bank Fund and the Home Bank of Quincy Fund. The donors for those funds asked that local citizens of those counties be asked to make the selections for the grants, and so in order to benefit those specific field of interest areas that those funds were set up for. And so the Adams County Fund Council and the Marion County Fund Council also distribute funds from those grants funds as well. So when you make a application to the Community Foundation, you may receive a grant, a grant anywhere from $500 to $5,000. It could be a partial grant from what your application is, or it could be the full amount that you're applying for, depending on the program and how it gets allocated. But for an example of the funding scenario, your applications are probably going to be looked at a minimum of 2 different groups of people are looking at them, and in some cases up to 3 different groups of people will be evaluating your applications to determine if they're going to receive funding from the Community Foundation. All applications that we receive do go before the Community Foundation's Grant Committee. And this committee is made up of individuals from across our 12 counties who come together from various areas of expertise to look and review grant applications and help determine what money, the money that we do have, how it gets allocated. As I said earlier, if your program happens to fall within one of those 6 counties that have their own county endowment fund, the local county fund council will also look at your application. And then every application that comes through that is approved for evaluation by the grant committee also gets put into what we call the Book of Opportunities. And we send that Book of Opportunities to all the donor advisors, to all of our donor advised funds. And this is a way for us to share what good works are being done in our communities and give them the opportunity to help fund some of those projects. And every year, a certain number of projects, there will be a donor advised fund advisor that something from the Book of Opportunity kind of jumps out at them and says, I really like this project idea. I want to contribute something from my fund towards this project. So all your applications are going to be evaluated and reviewed, and you may receive a grant for $1,000. That grant, in most cases, is not going to all come from one specific fund. It's going to have funding from multiple sources. So you may receive $350 from a donor advised fund, $300 from a specific field of interest fund that your project meets that purpose of. You might receive $100 from the unrestricted endowment, and then if it's in one of those local counties that have a county fund council, you might receive $250 from the county fund council. So while you're getting just a single $1,000 check and you only have to make one report to the Community Foundation, there are multiple different funds that are contributing to the success of that program and to the grant that you're going to receive. For our competitive grants in 2020, the following timeline applies. The grant process opened up on March 1st of this year, so applications are now live now, and you can go in and start working on them anytime that you can get to them. And they will close on June 1st at 11:59 in the evening. That will automatically close, so you will no longer be able to apply for any grants after June 1st. Now, one thing that is very important, and if you don't learn anything else from today's session besides this, please, 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 before you hit submit on your application, request that the Community Foundation staff does a review of your application. The staff will review your application, make sure there's no technical inaccuracies on it that would get you disqualified, and make sure that you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed, so you've met all the technical requirements from the application so that you can be eligible for review by the grant committee and be sent to those donor advisors. Any grant application that you request a review on before May 22nd, I guarantee that you will receive a review, and if there's any deficiencies in your application, we will tell you what those are, and you'll still have time to get them corrected before the June 1st deadline. Now, if May 22nd comes and goes and it's not yet June 1st, and you haven't submitted your application yet, please call and ask me if I have time to review your application. I can't guarantee it after May 22nd, but if I do have time, I will try to get a review done on your application. So please don't think that just because the May 22nd has happened, there's no chance for review. It just all depends on what my schedule is like and how many other applications came in before May 22nd for review. So please still ask. I just can't guarantee it if it's after May 22nd. So after application deadline closes on June 1st, from the first 7 days in June, we will review all the applications, perform a due diligence on them to make sure that they have met all of our requirements. And then on June the 8th, those applications are sent to our grant committees, our county fund council committees for their review, and they will evaluate and score those grant applications for the balance of the month of June. This will also be when that book of opportunities is sent out to our donor advisors. And then by early July, the grant committees will come together and start making recommendations on where that they want to make grants to and which programs are going to receive funding. Then after that first initial meeting, if there's any applications or any agencies that the committee has additional questions that they need to have answered for before they can make their final decision, the Community Foundation staff will contact those agencies who've submitted applications that there's questions on to get answers for the committee. And then in mid-July, we will have the final grant recommendation committee meeting from the grant committee. They will make recommendations to the board, and the board will meet on July 28th to approve those grant recommendations. Any applications that are approved for funding, whether fully or partially, and all those applications that are not funded, you'll be notified by August 5th of the Community Foundation's decisions. Now, with the grant applications, I said before that last year we had $125,000 that was given out in grants to the community partners and agencies that requested them. Of that, that was only part of the request. We had over $360,000 worth of requests made, so there's no way that we can fund all the projects. There were many projects that went unfunded last year that were fantastic projects. It just so happened that there were other people doing fantastic projects as well, and unfortunately we don't have the funding to fund everything. After notifications is sent out by the 5th of August, we will part of that notification will tell you where we will have our public grant presentations at. Grant presentations will be done by mid-August, and this year it will be at an agency somewhere in Missouri. One of our grantees in Missouri will host the grant presentation for the Community Foundation this year. Last year we went up to Carthage, Illinois to the Legacy Theater, and that was very well received, and so we're committed to making that presentation this year somewhere in Missouri. But until we know who applies and what programs get approved, we can't lock in a location. With the grant awards, you will also, any grant awards that are made by the county fund councils, each of those counties will have their own presentation ceremony to award grants that they're giving within their counties. So how do you give your best chance of scoring well and getting a chance to be evaluated by the grant committee and the donor advisors? Well, the first thing, please make sure that you carefully read and follow all the application instructions. This is very important that you don't miss anything and that you provide all the information that the grant committees need in order to make their decisions. The second thing I want to do is make sure that you ask for that application review. Third, another document that is on the website that you can download, there is a sheet of helpful hints that are just general helpful hints to any grant that you write. So please review that list before you submit your grant application. And probably the most important helpful hint I would give is please have somebody else in your agency also read through your application, making sure that that it's understandable and it's very clear what it is you're asking for. Fourth, I want to please make sure you ask for an application review. And then you have on the back side of that helpful hint, on page 2 of that helpful hint sheet, there's actually a disqualification sheet. And if you commit any of those things that are listed on the disqualification sheet, your application would not be reviewed at all. So make sure you're not doing any of those disqualifiable actions to give yourself the best chance to be reviewed. And the final helpful hint is ask for an application review. This is very important to make sure that if there is any technical error, we can get that corrected before you actually submit your application and give you that opportunity to get your application reviewed. So how exactly, once the applications are approved for review, how are they evaluated? Well, the application receives the following evaluations, and this how we evaluate is actually in that grant policy and guidelines. It's in section 5 on page 6. We'll tell you what the evaluation process is. And the first thing that we look at is, does your organization have the capacity to conduct this project, and is it set up to make this a sustainable project? Because we don't like to fund things that aren't going to be around for long term. And if you're establishing a new program, we want to make sure that not only can you get the program started, but actually you have a plan in place to keep that program going for years to come. With the competitive grants, we also want any of the program projects or the general support grants that you make, we want you to clearly show that you have a plan to make the application a success, and as well as an evaluation plan to determine how successful that your performance on that plan is. So make sure you have a clear plan and an evaluation plan in place. We're also looking for impacts and outcomes. We're looking, what is this project going to do? How is it going to impact your community? And what outcome are you hoping to receive? What behavior are you hoping to change, or what need in the community are you hoping to satisfy by the completion of your project? We also, it's very important to us that you show that you're collaborating with others. Now, there are certain communities and there's certain types of projects that is not possible to collaborate with others for, and we certainly understand that. But again, as I said earlier, anytime you're working with other people to make a project happen, the likelihood of its success goes up the more people that you have involved in that. We also want to make sure that the plan that you're putting in place has community support, and it's not just something that is basically in a silo and the rest of the community doesn't know anything about and hasn't been, isn't going to be part in contributing to the success of your project. And then we're also going to look at your budget and financial statements. We look at these in order to ensure that your agency has that stability and a plan in place that you know where you're going and where you've been. So that we would hate to make a contribution to an organization that before you're able to complete the program that you're applying for, your agency folds and goes under because you don't have a strong budget or financial plan in place. We want to make sure that we are making grants to the most stable of the organizations, because we have an obligation to our donors to be good stewards of those monies that we're entrusted to grant out. Again, I said the grant policy and guidelines section 5. Page 6 will tell you more details on the grant evaluation plan. And for your proposal to be a great idea, or your proposal should be more than just a great idea, you need to make sure that you have a plan in place for carrying out the project or program you're doing. So what qualities will make a great proposal? Well, we want you to demonstrate that there's energy and excitement and enthusiasm for the project you're trying to do. We also want you to show us that the expertise is available to make it happen. The proposal needs to reflect that you have a deep understanding of the problem and that the opportunity that you're addressing is something that you have the capability of doing. We also want your project to demonstrate the commitment that you have to making it a success. We also want it to be clear and to the point, so it's easily understandable for someone who may not know anything about your community or the project you're trying to understand. Your application should be written in such a way that it's easy for them to understand. Again, we want to stress that collaborative effort, that you're working with others to make this success. Please tell us how this project is going to benefit the community as a whole. And then we want to make sure that you have a very comprehensive strategy and plan in place to make sure that you have a clear plan and clear path to success as you can. And we want to make sure that the effectiveness of the program is also demonstrated. This proposal needs to reflect that it's well designed, have ongoing evaluations to determine that you're working towards the successful outcome, and reflect the commitment of getting results when the project is over. In order to apply for a competitive grant, all applications do have to be submitted online. We do not accept paper copies. You have to go onto our online system to apply for a grant, and that can be found at www.mycommunityfoundation.org. And if you listen to the second webinar section of this thing, the second downloadable recorded message will tell you exactly how to go through the application, and we'll step through that application step by step. These applications need to be submitted by June 1st of 2020. And if you have any questions about this project or any of the things you're working on with the Community Foundation, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My name again is Heath Richmond. My email is hrichmond@mycommunityfoundation.org, or you can call me at 217-222-1237. You can find us on the World Wide Web at mycommunityfoundation.org, and we also are on Facebook. Thank you very much for listening to this webinar presentation, and hopefully you'll listen to the second part of it about the grant application, and then I'll see wonderful applications from each of you, and that all of you who make an application will be calling and asking me to review your application before you hit submit. Thank you very much.